Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Washington, it's Friday. That's right, the weekend is here. Apple Cup weekend. We're going to play the Apple Cup in September with decent weather on a neutral field. Once again, showing you that the state of Washington is completely and utterly broken. What we're going to do today, once we get Michael Easton on board, he's going to bring all the receipts. We're going to do an analysis of just how fiscally responsible Attorney General Ferguson has been in running his office so that we can then see just how financially responsible he might be as a governor. Why is that? Well, because when you live under a uniparty state, shockingly, they don't run really tight books. We'll go through all the receipts. We'll get you all educated. So today, let's start geeking out and let's do another Friday with Ferguson. Okay, Washington, here's what we're going to be talking about today in just a moment with Michael Easton. He's bringing all the receipts with him, but we're going to talk about how responsible is Bob Ferguson in running his Attorney General's office from a financial standpoint and taking a look at their expenditures and things like that, so that we can then try to extrapolate how he would operate as a governor. Because when you start seeing some of the budget concerns that Mr. Easton has uncovered, you're going to understand that this becomes a very important issue. So without further ado, let's get Michael here. All right, everyone, as promised, who do we got? That's right, it's Michael Easton. Michael, say hi to everybody.
Hi, how are you doing today?
We are doing fantastic. It's Friday. The weekend is nearly upon us. Now, for those who have been living under a rock and don't know how to follow all the cool information that Michael Easton is putting out on a daily basis, why don't you tell the viewers how you do that?
You can find me on Twitter at Michael Easton Wah.
All right, and there it is right there. Now, Michael, we're at Volume 3. You having fun so far doing this with us?
Having an absolute blast, sir. Thank you.
It has been a thrill to work with you. We share one thing in common, which politically we see the world pretty similar, but we are both really big about fiscal responsibility. As a matter of fact, if you go back and you really take a look at a lot of the work that you do as it relates to your public disclosure request, it really comes to holding government accountable for how they're spending our money. And so this is a topic that you and I geek out about a lot, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one of the things back a few months ago when we were kicking the idea around about doing this series is I was like, why don't you start taking a look into where is the state budget today for real? Because, what the state tells you, and then, of course, what the Republicans will tell you about the state of the budget and all that, you got to take a little bit of that with a grain of salt. So I said, why don't you just go straight into the books and figure it out? So for the viewers, why don't you just give them an overall sense of the health of the Washington state budget and where we are financially from a health standpoint?
Currently, the budget is in pretty bad shape, honestly. For a lot of people that don't know, the Washington state budget goes on a 2-year, they call it a biennium basis. So for fiscal year for the biennium of 2023 to 2025, we are going to be bringing in approximately $66.5 billion in revenue. However, we're going to be spending $85 billion for that same 2-year period, a $19 billion deficit.
Okay. And as if that's not bad enough, you did a little bit more digging around. And of course, every year, the governor in his state of the state address and all of that, and then on a biennium basis, will make budget proposals themselves. Now, the current governor, who is Jay Inslee, had a budget proposal, and I think you and I both were a little sticker shocked at this one. Why don't you tell the viewers about that?
Yeah, I found the statewide expenditure summary for 2023 to 2025. Governor Inslee had recommended a total spend of $141.9 billion, or roughly $80 billion more than we were bringing in.
Okay, all right. And then what a lot of people don't also realize is that even though you may account for new spending in a budget, there are programs that have carried over for a number of years that also have to be funded because they might be ongoing programs. And so there's a separate budget line for what we call maintenance. Essentially, we're maintaining programs that we have previously promised the citizens of Washington and need to continue to fund. And how much is the state spending on that?
They are spending $125.576 billion.
Okay. And now for the viewers, understand that there may be some revenue also associated with the programs that they're funding there. So that's not necessarily we're going completely backwards $125 billion, but we do need to understand that this is all part of the operating budget that we're sifting through here, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So you right now, if all the numbers just line up the way they're supposed to be, we're going to be how much in debt?
If it goes to the 140, if it goes to the 125, we're looking at a roughly $60 billion deficit. If it goes to the 141, we're looking at an $80 billion deficit. Even if we go with the lowest number, we're at a $19 billion deficit.
Okay, so Michael, as we know, our Attorney General thinks he ought to be our next governor, and we'll point out he had a little bit of a rough night last night in the debate. But that aside, he could easily say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to do things differently than Jay Inslee, and I'm going to run the state in a much more fiscally and financially responsible manner." And so I think you and I decided, well, let's take a look at how he's doing that from the Attorney General standpoint. So if the myth is that if elected governor, Bob Ferguson will run a much more financially responsible state, what would you say to that myth?
That is completely false. There is just no way that he is fiscally responsible.
Okay, now that's a bold opinion. So now we're going to have to start going through the receipts. That's what we promise our viewers here. So let's back it all up to volume 1 of this series that you and I did. And let's remind the viewers again of how much in 12 years as Attorney General, Mr. Ferguson's office had been assessed fines, fees, assessments, and other types of penalties for really candidly nefarious actions.
He has faced a total of $16.2 million.
$16.2 million. Okay. Now, one of the things we didn't talk about in episode 1, we decided we'd hold back and bring it up in this episode, was 2 other very alarming lawsuits. And these are ones in which the state of Washington is now being sued by somebody. And when I say the state of Washington, specifically the Attorney General's office.
Yes. The first lawsuit that I found was Bob Ferguson is being sued for racketeering and for illegally using proprietary data. Without getting too technically into the weeds on that, he is being sued for $42 million.
Okay. And this is a lawsuit that has to do with a contract for the production or the construction of a data center. It also involves Washington State University as one of the named parties in that, I understand.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, we're not going to get too deep into it, but the alleged amount of damages that the plaintiff wants in that matter is how much again?
$42 million.
$42 million. Okay. There's another one that's been a little bit more publicized, and it's a bit more publicized because the underlying activity was highly publicized. And that is, of course, the 2020 killings of Manuel Ellis that took place in Tacoma, and several Tacoma police officers that were charged but acquitted of criminal activity for that crime. And in particular, we found that apparently one officer has taken some serious exception to what Attorney General Ferguson's office did to his reputation. Why don't you tell the viewers about that?
Yeah, Attorney General Ferguson's office is being sued for $47 million because the officer in question says that they falsely accused him of racist and criminal conduct, destroying his reputation and ruining his chances of finding work.
Okay. And that is an officer, Timothy Rankine, and I will point out once again, found not guilty by a jury of his peers. And so that lawsuit is also pending. So we're looking there at basically $89 million of lawsuits and just 2 lawsuits against the Attorney General's office. Is that right?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
Okay. Now, as you and I were spitballing ideas about, well, how do we really determine how fiscally responsible they're being in running the office? And this never occurred to me, but you thought of something that we should take a look at. Why don't you tell the viewers as it relates to the operations and how the state operates the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, I had looked on the state website for all the spending that they had, and one thing that kind of caught my eye was their building that they have in downtown Seattle. That building currently is being leased for $502,000 per month.
I'm sorry, did you say $500,000 per month?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, how many offices does the Attorney General's office, as you could tell through public records, how many offices do they have around the state?
I found 23 entries for payment for buildings and things like that.
Okay, and I want the viewer to understand that I candidly, I don't think it's crazy that the Attorney General's office would have small satellite offices in various locations in the state of Washington. So the number didn't really jump off the page at me. What jumped off the page at me, though, was if you take a look at what we pay for 22 of them combined,
Mhm.
and you compare that to what we pay for the 23rd. Why don't you tell the
Uh-huh.
viewers about that?
Yeah, so for the 2021 to 2023 biennium, he paid $14 million dollars, or roughly $7 million dollars a year. Of that $7 million dollars a year, the flagship building, I guess for lack of a better word, costs $6 million dollars.
Well, but it's not the flagship building because, the Attorney General's office is based in Olympia, Washington.
Yes, in fact, that's an excellent point. The building itself is in Seattle. It is in deep, deep, deep downtown Seattle. In fact, about 5 blocks from the water.
Yeah, I
Gorgeous.
mean, it's prime real estate in a high rise. They probably got some pretty killer views up there.
Mhm.
And recently, I just saw an article where there's estimating somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all office space in the downtown corridor is currently vacant. So it's probably a good renter's market right now. Did you happen to just look around, I don't know, in the general vicinity there to see if there was other comparable real estate space? Because that's what realtors would do. If you were going to try to assess,
Mhm.
hey, what's the value of this property, you would look for what they call comps. So did you do that?
Yeah, in fact, the previous attorney general had moved into this particular building to, quote, save money. In fact, when they moved into this building, they were going to save approximately $2.75 million dollars per year. So I just happened to be looking around. I found a building that's actually going to be available. It is brand spanking new, and it is going to go for roughly $33 a square foot versus the $52 per square foot that the attorney general currently pays. So he's basically looking at another $2 million dollars that he would save.
Okay. I want to circle back on these lawsuits that
Mhm.
we were talking about. The 42 million, 47 million, and these are just a couple of big ones. There's some other smaller ones out there. But when the Attorney General is getting sued, who represents the Attorney General?
That would be a outfit called Pacifica Law Group.
Have you had an opportunity to look into Pacifica Law Group and learn a little bit more about them?
Yeah, in fact, I did, and I found some quite interesting things on there. The first thing that I found that was they in one particular year they had done $512,411.91 in work. But more interestingly was I found out that 77 employees of Pacifica were donators to his campaign.
Interesting. Okay. And
Mhm.
just to give an idea, do you know roughly how many employees Pacifica Law Group may employ?
That I don't know. How many
Okay.
are there?
Okay. So we don't know if that's a 10%, if that's 50%, but there was at least 70.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And
Correct.
we have had an opportunity to take a look at who all or most of the attorneys are that work in Pacifica Law Group, and they seem to
Mhm.
have one common thread, and that is.
They all worked for the Attorney General's office.
So, do you know approximately how much money the attorneys combined and again, there's nothing wrong with attorneys donating to political campaigns. I'm not suggesting that for a second. And so, what weight people want to attach to this is their own decision to make. But approximately how much money had been donated to Bob Ferguson's campaign from individuals employed at Pacifica Law Group?
$41,577.22.
Okay. And then the Attorney General's office had provided them how much in business within 1 year?
In one year, they got $512,411.91.
Okay. Did you find any other private law firms doing contract work for the Attorney General's office?
No, I had not. I had looked. Maybe there are a few out there, but haven't found any in my searches.
Now, we've talked about Attorney General Ferguson's lack of financial responsibility in running the office and some rather ludicrous expenses that have been incurred unnecessarily. But it appears that the office, as is a lot of people on that side of the fence, are hell bent against some initiatives that are on the ballot this year. Have you had an opportunity to take a look at those initiatives?
Yeah, in fact, there's four of them that I found. Initiative 2066, which was to repeal the natural gas ban.
Mhm.
Initiative 2109, which was to repeal the capital gains tax. The Initiative 2117, which repeals the climate change
Yeah,
act.
carbon tax credit.
Correct.
Yeah.
Initiative 2124, which gives people the option of opting out of long-term care.
Yeah. So, let's talk about a couple of those here because, again, if we're already talking about this budget deficit that you've kind of transcribed through public records here, And there's really only one of two ways that a state could ever, if they wanted to actually try to bring their budget into balance, is you either got to cut spending or you got to increase revenue.
Hmm.
And this state certainly has not shown any interest in cutting spending. So we kind of know what option they're going to do. Let's talk about this capital gains tax, which interestingly, by the way, I will point out that in 41 other states in the United States, capital gains tax is considered to be an income tax. Now, if it were an income tax in Washington, it'd be unconstitutional because, as we know, you can't have an income tax through our state constitution.
Mhm.
Shockingly, the Washington State Supreme Court believes it to be an excise tax. So
Yeah, that's
41 other states call it a income tax. Washington State, however, calls it an excise tax.
hmm
Okay.
Yeah.
But right now, when they first pass it, hey, it's only $250,000 or more, and it's only going to be at 7%. But when you were taking a look at what was going on with the capital gains tax, you found some other stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, in fact, the thing that I had found that was really caught my eye was there in the 2021 to 2023 budget proposal, they were looking to drop the amount from $250,000 to $25,000 for an individual person or $50,000 for a married couple. And more importantly, they were going to raise the amount from 7% to 9%.
Right. Yeah. So that is literally in motion what we talk about. Give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Oh, it's only going to be for people making this much or more, and it's only going to be at this low percentage. And then all over the course of time, the percentage goes up, the threshold comes down, everyone's getting smoked by the deal. And then let's also talk about the carbon tax credit, because one of the things is that Attorney General Ferguson got caught up in some really odd controversy as it related to advising energy companies about their billing statements.
Yeah, in fact, he had advised those people to hide that bill from the public. They were going to line item it so that people could see how much it was legitimately going to cost them on their bill.
Right, because it was only going to cost them pennies a month. Remember that?
Right, that's what Inslee said. There was just going to cost pennies for it. And so he ended up telling them, you should hide this and just roll it into their particular, the total of the bill.
Okay. And so where has the Attorney General come as it relates to these initiatives, which I will point out means that there were hundreds of thousands of people who signed this. Remember, all of these were taken to the legislature. The legislature only chose to take up a small handful of them. The rest of them go to the ballot. Where's the Attorney General's office coming down on these issues?
He is against all of these. In fact, our friend Brittany Cruz decided to ask him about that, and he said that he was not going to comment on it and decided that he was going to block her.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, well, Michael, it's that time we go full circle again. And we're going to go full circle with this myth. If elected governor, Attorney General Ferguson will run a much more financially responsible state. True or false?
Absolutely false. There is no way that he is fiscally responsible by any metric.
Okay. Now, we've showed a bunch of graphics during this presentation. Why don't you tell the viewers about what's linked up down below in the description box? Because we bring all the receipts.
Yep, we will be linking absolutely everything. The budget proposals, the documents, the articles, absolutely everything.
Okay. And then, again, in case they haven't been paying attention, one more time, how can everyone follow Michael Easton and get a daily dose of the education from you?
You can find me on Twitter at Michael Easton Wa.
All right, Michael, as always, thank you very much. Have a fantastic Friday and a killer weekend.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Listen, like I said at the very beginning of this video, I do not believe that financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility is a partisan issue. Whether you're conservative or liberal, whether you're independent or just slightly leaning right or slightly leaning left, this is all of our taxpayer dollars. And the government has an obligation to wisely use those funds. And so the question I leave for all of you to make your own decisions, and based upon what you know so far, is Bob Ferguson the right guy to be the governor of the state of Washington? Listen, as always, we're going to go ahead and link everything up down below, so you don't have to believe us. It will all be down there in black and white so that you can see all of the receipts for yourself. Maybe you got some other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our rights here in Washington State. Not much, by the way. You should know how to get a hold of Washington Gun Law by now, but if you don't, that's okay. That information, it's down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video that we should be doing around here, tell us by clicking on that link. Your idea is probably better than anything we're going to come up with. Maybe you just want to subscribe to our monthly newsletter. The ability to do that is all down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Keep fighting, Washington, and stay safe.